But Fatma, Sandy, Brenda, Joan, and I thought about families and the effects of war, the trauma, the PTSD of families that have lost loved ones, often on both sides of the weaponry, but not equally remembered and counted. We talked about commemoration, how moving on is not possible, and how being forgotten becomes a layer of loss and grief that cannot be shared. Our concern for the endless acceleration of military weapons spending, including weapon contracts to Saudi Arabia and the Lockheed Martin offices in Dartmouth, always comes around to our responsibility to act and to include the human side of what the arms trade looks like. What is the true cost of military spending? What would these families say? We began the project by contacting Aisha Juman of the Yemeni Relief and Reconstruction Foundation and peace activist Kathy Kelly, and we were encouraged to continue with the project. Aisha has been in touch with the families in Yemen. The 48-plus border squares, the feathers, large and small, have been sewn by community members from many groups, including Nova Scotia Voice of Women for Peace, Halifax Raging Grannies, the Muslim Women's Study Group, Immigrant and Migrant Women's Association of Halifax, Missing Murdered and Indigenous Women and Girls Reading Group, Thousand Harbors Zen Sangha, Buddhist nuns, and other faith-based groups, as well as the National Board of Voice of Women for Peace and Friends from Sea to Sea. To create better systems of care for one another, we need each other. And this banner came together despite the obstacles of time and space. All of the feathers and squares were stitched and shared by mail or dropped and picked up in mailboxes during the height of the pandemic. All of us were experiencing isolation and our own worries and missing family and friends. Joan and Brenda have been the pillars behind the work, creating the backing, sewing as the pieces came in, and offering their creative expertise. The thank yous go out to all participants. Mothers sewed with daughters, old friends said yes to the project, and friends that may not have stitched directly on the banner rallied for completion. But I want to mention particularly that when Fatma and I talked about the Arabic calligraphy for the feathers, she immediately responded that it would be no problem at all, and within 3 days, the names of the 38 lives were in my mailbox, ready for transfer to the cloth. The Muslim Women's Study Group shared their stories on Zoom in our scheduled meetings, and those connections at the heart continue to be the hidden treasures of this work, as are the squares themselves. I could tell you about a few of them, but it's a little chilly. But there are pieces of cloth. Most women added some cloth that was important to them. I have a piece of a skirt from my mother. There's a maternity, from a maternity top of some friends, wedding dress pieces. One square is a memorial to a mother with different squares from her dress, and a piece that is from a sister that had passed away. So they are all connected in very strong ways. I think there's even a square from Rachel in Cape Breton's first Girl Guide uniform, so she mentioned. So it's a wonderful collection. But I also just want to say a few of the names of the children. Those names were given to babies held in mother's arms. Ahmed, Mohammed, Ali, Hussein, Akab, Yusuf. To remember all who have suffered, we must remind those who live by the sword to heed the words of Toni Morrison, that violence against violence, regardless of good and evil, right and wrong, is itself so foul that the sword of vengeance collapses in exhaustion or shame. The death of these children is a shameful, grievable shadow on all of us. This project began in January 2021. In June, flags were lowered, and the call to find all unmarked Indigenous grave sites and to give children proper closure followed the discovery of the first 215 bodies of children in Kamloops. Members of the weekly reading group of missing, murdered, and Indigenous women and girls have stitched many hearts with the footprints that have been sewn on the covering that will hold the banner when it's not on display. this is a part of the case that will cover the banner when it maybe travels. I believe we know something about repairing. This commemoration is a call for repairing harm that is done, and even if we are unsure how to repair the harm, we do what we can where we can. Reparations and reconciliation is the repair work. Let me leave you with one thought before we lay the wreaths. Recently, there was an online lecture given that is a preamble to a major conference for the 2023 University Studying Slavery Conference. And in his brilliant lecture, Sir Hilary Beckles, the Vice Chancellor of the University of the West Indies, points out that the climate change discourse and the reparations discourse are two sides of the same coin. Both must push humanity to, quote, its highest level of sophisticated performance as the essential fuel for change, and the possibility of this systemic change, a change that has integrity, cannot be achieved without reparations. Sorry. For the last line. If we cannot repair the past, we cannot prepare for the future. Thank you.